All right, welcome to meeting number 347 of the Harpooners of the Sea Unicorn, the Sherlock Holmes Society of St. Charles. Glad you could join us, whoever's out there. Hopefully people will be joining. Some people have actually threatened to come in and join us on the internet, so let's see how that goes. All right, so our story this month is The Adventure of the Cardboard Box. In my opinion, probably one of the most depressing stories of the canon, but we'll get to that soon enough. As always, let's go ahead and begin with the usual, whatever good $5,000 word I can put for this $20 sentence that I can't think. The usual stuff. Let's go ahead and begin with our toast to the Queen, which will be read, given by Rob Rath. We'll also be doing the paper, by the way.
To Her Imperial Majesty Victoria, by the grace of God of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, and of her other realms and territories, Queen, Empress of India, Defender of the Faith, long may she reign.
God save the Queen.
Hear, hear, hear.
Yeah.
All right, be seated. By the way, part of your job over there as camera monkey is if any comments come, let us know. As last month we did this and we had comments coming, and since we didn't have a camera monkey, we had to put that on the other, way down from the table from us. And every now and then we'd see something, I had to run over. Yeah, what's this? Oh, wow, okay. And it looked nice and stupid. Not that I need any help with that. So, anyway.
Nice or stupid?
Yes. So anyway, welcome again to our 347th meeting. Our next meeting, by the way, will be Friday, 21st of December at 6:52 p.m. That's 18:52 for the rest of us here at PO's. The story will be The Adventure of the Blue Carbuncle, the Christmas story, as it is every year, at least since we've gone back to doing this tradition. My notes originally said that the presenter was open, but we have the honor of having it's being taken over by Brother John Foster here. And,
Amen.
Yes. So he'll be, whether he makes it here or if he has to email it to us, it'll get here. We still need some papers. Well, actually, we got quite a few sign-ups already for the rest of his last bow. We are shy on the red circle, which is January, and some ideas for how we can have a red circle party since we're at an Italian restaurant might be a good idea. Besides having a bunch of pepperoni pizza, all those red circles on there. Yes. Forget whose idea that was. That you or Tom that came up with that?
Wasn't mine.
Must have been Tom. Could have sworn
the
it was
pizza's
you.
round too.
Yeah, but it's not red like the pepperoni is.
But I mean, a round pepperoni pizza.
Yeah. Okay, and also Dying Detective on the 15th of March. It would be nice to have some help with the April 5th meeting for Sherlock Holmes' 165th birthday, where we will be covering the two short stories, The Field Bazaar and How Watson Learned the Trick. You can go to our website and we'll have it whalingnews.wordpress.com, as well as any of the harpooners.wordpress.com sites, and they'll have some information and links to those stories if you want to help me with that. Also, need somebody for the his last bow on the in August. We may need to modify the date on that one too. So, but all this is posted at those websites. So, let's see. Also, the Parallel Case of St. Louis has their next meeting on Saturday. Yeah, the month of Saturday on Janter Day. Saturday, 12th January. Next year at the Schlafly branch of the St. Louis Public Library, where they will be observing The Adventure of the Musgrave Ritual.
I wish they had made the Schlafly branch of the Schlafly Brewery.
Yeah.
Especially in January when
Burns' birthday.
Burns Ale comes out.
Okay. And you can get more information about their, what they're going to be covering and their events at parallelcasestl, one word, .wixsite, WIXSITE.com. If you don't know how to spell com, too bad. Also, there's a group called the Great Alkali Plainsmen of Greater Kansas City. And according to what I see on their website, they will be meeting Saturday, the 2nd of December at 6 p.m. for their Feast of the Blue Carbuncle at Piermont's at Union Station in Kansas City, Missouri.
That's a deeper layer.
They're taking the name of the one that went defunct.
Please, this is a family video.
Yeah,
The one
it's
that
in
went
prime time.
defunct.
Actually, from what I'm seeing, they're trying to continue where they left off, although it did.
And when did
peter up
it start up again? 'Cause I'm on the
Sometime
web-
this year, I do believe. But I'm mentioning
Well,
them.
I'm glad to see that, because
Yes.
I hated that it dropped
Right,
when those two guys died.
exactly. But I found out about this. Michael Waxenberg gave me that flyer where it's mentioning us along. That's their agenda for their October meeting. They've got a website of Alkali Plainsman, one word, .wixsite.com/Great Alkali Plainsman. You've got to have that thing on the end, or you're going to find an error. Trust me on this. And these folks were kind enough to mention our meeting today. Seems fitting we mention them as well. Hopefully they're watching, whether right now or ex post facto. I'm sorry?
What's that?
The Great Alkali, hopefully they're, ex post facto, after the fact. Learn Latin, you whatever. Hopefully we can, hopefully we can leave the shingle open for them if they happen to be here some third Friday of the month. And also, while we're mentioning other Midwestern Sherlock Holmes societies, the occupants of the empty house, which is the Sherlock Holmes Society of Southern Illinois, or should I say DuQuoin,
No, it's
Southern Illinois, will have their next meeting on Friday the 7th of December at, am I pronouncing this right, Alongi's? Alongi's, okay.
Soft G.
All right, Alongi's restaurant, excuse me, in DuQuoin, Illinois, around 12:30. The story they will be observing is The Adventure of the Speckled Band, which Bill Cochran managed to confirm for me. I thought it would be the Red Circle based on what they were looking at a few months ago with the 6 Napoleons. And I got it wrong. Let's see, as I mentioned before, we'll be celebrating Holmes' his 165th birthday on the 5th of April
He doesn't
this
look a day
year.
over 150. He doesn't look a day over 100.
No,
No, he doesn't. Hopefully we'll also have a Red Circle party for our Adventure of the Red Circle observance in January the 18th. I'm also looking to try and expand some stuff on the Whaling News monthly newsletter. Maybe some other entertainment to put into the baleen. Put some, in the blubber, I'm sorry. Also, this is probably business we should have handled outside of this, but do we want to try...
Okay, close your ears.
Yeah, right. Do we want to try and start doing some hard copies or something for those harpooners like Diane, for instance, who would probably prefer a hard copy or something? Okay. Means I got to find a way to...
Can't you email it to her and let her print it? Or should
Remind me.
She yeah, we'll have to update you on her situation there. So.
And again.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's all the stuff I have for regular announcements. Is there anything I've missed or anything anybody else has?
Announcements that Barry Hapner died, or Hatner, however you say it, and his wife's trying to get rid of his stuff, and he has a ton of stuff.
Sounds like
Kinda
Gordon
like-
Speck.
Kind of like Speck, but Speck's was pretty near all books.
Yes.
This guy's his stuff too. He's got a lot of stuff. And I bought $200 worth of stuff at the Pipe Club last Saturday.
Wow. Okay.
So anyway, her name is Susan Hatner, or Hapner. 314-434.
Instead of putting that out in public, why don't we,
Yeah.
anybody wants that information can contact them.
Okay.
You can get me at my email at PCAIRNES26 for pcairns26 at outlook.com. 26, by the way, is how many voyages Mr. Cairns had done when he was interviewing for the job with Holmes.
By the way, you can't dawdle on that Sundays when she's trying to get rid of stuff.
Okay, so email me at that address and we'll pass it on to you. Anything else? Okay. Oh,
Or they can contact Mary Schrader. You got her name, number?
He will also make that available.
I'll try to make that available too, yes.
All good.
Just
with
get me at
20.
pcairns26@outlook.com. Okay, so let's see. Any comments coming in yet? Or wow, they're jumping like flies. So when I'm ready for them, they're not coming. Okay, it's time for the Toast to Holmes, which is actually your realm. You didn't bring your drink with you, did you?
No.
I want to pass that down to her. Our camera monkey is doing the Toast to Holmes. She can turn it to herself so everybody can see, or you can just get the audio. So, up to you.
Okay. To Holmes, a man who never misses a detail, who sees right through a crime.
That's it for you. All right, and now it's time for our presentation on the adventure of the cardboard box, as given to us by Mr. Rob Rath.
Yes, sir.
There you go.
Ready for me to start?
Go for it. Yes.
Okay.
You're on camera.
The case of the cardboard box is one of the most interesting cases of jealousy and mistaken identity in the annals of Sherlock Holmes. It starts with what appears to be a sick joke played on an unassuming middle-aged woman. She was sent a very peculiar package in the mail, 2 human ears and preservative salt. While Inspector Lestrade believes that this is nothing more than a tasteless joke done by 3 medical students who had a grudge against Miss Susan Cushing, Holmes is convinced that there is something more sinister going on. His instincts are proven correct when it's discovered that Miss Cushing's sister was murdered along with her boyfriend by her husband. The ears have been sent to the wrong sister, Susan instead of Sarah Cushing. Due to the nature of the story concerning marriage and infidelity, it is left out of the first printing of the memoirs of Sherlock Holmes. As stated by Leslie Klinger in his annotated edition of the memoirs of Sherlock Holmes, Card first appeared in the Strand magazine in January 1893. The first edition of memoirs, published in London by George Nunez Limited, contains only 11 stories, omitting Card from the series of 12 stories which appeared in the Strand magazine. Doyle decided to exclude the cardboard box due to it involving an illicit affair. Holmes examines both ears and deduces they are not a pair, and that one of the ears looks similar to the ear of Miss Susan Cushing. He further notes that upon glancing at a picture on the mantel by Susan Cushing, that she has 2 sisters, and from that deduction he learns that one of the ears belongs to one of the sisters. He states that he has researched the subject of the ear, and he refers to a couple of monographs on the subject of the ear penned by himself for the Journal of the Anthropological Institute of Great Britain and Ireland. Klinger states that while no one has ever found these exact monographs, he believes that 2 monographs matching Holmes' description have been found. According to Klinger, although no one has been able to locate the issues of the journal containing Holmes' monographs, there may have been monographs printed in the Strand magazine, which published a pair of unattributed monographs entitled A Chapter on Ears in the October 1893 and November 1893 issues. One is surprised that this case is even in Dr. Watson's published accounts due to Holmes' directions that he be left out of the matter. Holmes states to Inspector Lestrade that I should prefer that you do not mention my name at all in connection with the case, as I choose to be only associated with those crimes which present some difficulty in their solution. Why Watson will go ahead and have published this case must be due to the fact that Holmes had changed his mind on being connected with it. It is interesting to note that Holmes actually refers to Poe's Dupin's ability to read minds when, in the studying Scarlet, Holmes was so derisive of that character's talents. It's even more interesting to note that the mind-reading section of Card is used in The Resident Patient. Klinger states that the material following was pasted onto the beginning of Resident Patient when Card was suppressed in the George Nunez Ltd. edition of the memoirs. Holmes deduces much from the package that was sent to the wrong sister. From the writing on the wrapping, he learns that the sender was a male of limited education and little knowledge of the Croydon area. From the not closing the package, he learns there was a sailor who tied it. All these deductions plus other evidence leads him to Jim Browner. The issue of brain fever is discussed in the story when Mrs. Sarah Cushing is laid low by that disease, like the hearing about the ears. Klinger discussed how the disease seemed to be misused by the authors in the 19th century. As he states, that either the disease was epidemic in England or widely misdiagnosed. Brain fever was also suffered by Alice Rucastle in Copper Beeches, Miss Barclay in Crooked-Back, Rachel Howells in Musgrave Ritual, Percy Phelps in Naval Treaty, and probably Sir Henry Baskerville in Hamlet of Baskervilles, and Miss Bob Ferguson in The Sussex Vampire. Many other 19th century authors also used the disease of brain fever to describe the illness of their characters. Bronte, Flaubert, and Meredith were some of them. The disease is characterized by the patient suffering weight loss, pallor, and a high fever. Arthur Conan Doyle was criticized by overusing a vague disease that could have described any disease possible. But Klinger states that a medical textbook vindicates Doyle and the other 19th century authors. He states as a final vindication of Conan Doyle and other literary figures of the 19th century, an 1892 textbook describes fever as occurring in the occasional case of hysterical reaction. The case of the cardboard box is one of the many cases of mistaken identity in the canon. Jim Browner was sending that dreadful package to a Miss Sarah Cushing, but he sent it to a Miss Susan Cushing. He had addressed the package to a Miss S. Cushing, but had sent the wrong address. In a case of identity, the stepfather, Miss Mary Sutherland, was mistaken by her for a Hosmer angel. The case of the cardboard box is another instance where we are presented with a case of jealousy and mistaken identity. We are again astounded with Holmes' ability to take a few clues and through deduction and reasoning is able to unmask the culprit. The ears, the box, and the cord that tied the box were just a few items that led Holmes to Jim Browner, the unhappy drunk who murdered his wife and her boyfriend. This is one of the best stories in the canon.
Good.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay, before we begin any discussion on this, let's go ahead and get the toast to Watson taken care of.
Darn, I wasn't ready.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you
Oh, I
almost
had
drank
one too
all
and
his
I
wine.
forgot it. Here's to the best dog I ever had.
Here.
God save the Queen.
Oh, and I was actually going to say, here's to the one that misses most of the clues.
Yeah.
Here, here.
Here, here.
All right. So it's funny you bring up studying Scarlet. I've just been trying to immerse myself in the canon again, trying to do it in chronological order, getting it on the Hoopla app so I can have it read to me. And I've been noticing many parallels in a lot of the stories, and even paralleling with studying Scarlet. I like to talk about reading. Wasn't there another
Bless you.
story besides Cardboard Box where Watson was in his own thought, in his brown study, as I think he described it, and all of a sudden Holmes just pipes in with a, yes, you should do that. Yeah, wait a minute, how'd you get in there?
Resident Patient, I think, was the one story that had another mind reading section.
Yeah, in fact, I think that's the one. In fact, I think it shares pretty much the same dialogue as that one. In fact, you might have said that and I wasn't paying close enough attention. But I find it interesting that one of the short stories we'll be looking at in April does the same thing, the one about the Field Bazaar.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what? Watson just couldn't leave well enough alone. He kept going to something like that, eh?
Mm-hmm.
But something else I've noticed, between last month with, what was last month? Wisteria Lodge, and now this one, and again, Study in Scarlet. You remember Study in Scarlet was divided into two parts. It was part one, where Holmes is going through the mystery, and he finds the killer, right at the end of part one. And then they go into part two, which is all this background information for how Jefferson Hope got into the mess he was in the first place, so to say. And it took an entire half of the book to get all that fleshed out for him. And Watson does the same thing with Wisteria Lodge, where the first half is the mystery and the other half is other background information towards that. And kind of the same thing in this one, where it's like the first half was going through the mystery. Holmes pretty much had it solved back about 10 to 25% through the story earlier. And then at the halfway point, they get the confession from the actual killer. They spend the other half of the story with him. Yeah, when I was doing this, I was really mad when she was confronting me about this, blah, blah, blah. And so I just let him have it when I was in the lake with him. Whatever. Yeah, the spoiler alert, the guy killed him. So, it's just another parallel.
We've had 165 years to read the story. Spoiler alerts don't count.
Actually, we've only had
Yeah, 120 years.
130 actually.
Yeah.
Go ahead and down to him so you can use that for the website or whatever.
Well, I'd prefer the electronic copy.
You prefer the
actually.
electronic
Yes.
copy? Okay,
Yeah,
I'll try to send you an email.
Is that-
What do you got it in?
What?
I got it on a flash drive.
No, I mean, what program? Word?
Word, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I can work with that somehow. I just gotta paste it, or copy, paste, and then format it the way I like it. And,
Okay.
You
I'm
wanna
the editor,
take
I can do
in
that.
case he forgets?
well, okay.
Or
You
drop-
better- you
or
better- you
drops
might want-
dead or
Yeah.
something?
Michael's retired. He can type it in if
Yeah.
he needs to.
Oh, great! I'll never get it now.
Ah,
Any other thoughts besides what I just brought up?
Well, it's rare anymore now that I've been through the Canon several times that I get beyond the first couple paragraphs without finding something that's really interesting to talk about. And I think for this story, in many ways, and within the first several paragraphs, definitely the first couple of pages, summons up so much we love about the Canon. Baker Street being one thing, Holmes and Watson relaxing there, Holmes basically reading Watson's mind, the Brown study, which is a great joke about one Sherlockian didn't know which room to paint the Brown study in. And there's just so much great stuff. And, you know, Sherlock Holmes lived in a brown study. Well, I've got a green study in my basement. But there's just so much about the relationship between Holmes and Watson in the first couple of paragraphs of this story.
My wife usually tries to get me out of the brown study
Out of the
so
brown
that it'll
study, so you'll do
air
something
out.
else.
Yeah. So air
Another
out,
neat
and
thing-
maybe she can do her own business. So.
Another neat thing about this story is Mrs. Hudson is not mentioned. What is mentioned is when Holmes and Watson are ready to leave Baker Street on their adventure to Croydon, Holmes actually asks Watson to have the boots sent up by them. I'm trying to find the actual paragraph as they're ready to leave. You shall have it in them. Ring for our boots and tell them to order a cab. So we have to assume them, being the Baker Street irregulars, were somewhere in the house at that time, hanging out downstairs, ready to answer the door, ready to run errands. But Mrs. Watson isn't asked to bring up the boots. Them are asked to bring up the boots. And I found that really interesting. Plus, we're also mentioned about the dressing gown in here, the brown study, which we've also mentioned, the paintings that are hanging on the wall. I think it's just a really great beginning. And like I said, I very seldom get beyond the first couple paragraphs here lately because there's just so much in there. But there's also so many other details. I thought I had stumbled on something that might not have been done before, but I didn't. But it made me look into something else. Holmes mentions once again, like they do in many of the stories, other cases that we never get to read about. So what I decided to do was look online. So this is an online look on, what's that podcast? I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere.
Okay.
So I got this list from the I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere. If you haven't listened to that podcast, it's a great podcast. And they've got basically a 3-page listing in this font of all the unwritten cases of Sherlock Holmes. It is really interesting that there are more mentioned in the canon that have not been written about than there are actually stories written in the canon.
Well, what I find interesting is maybe a couple of times he's mentioned something in an earlier story, and then he ends up writing the story, and it's not exactly with the details he led before.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah, I'm
Very
trying
true.
to remember. I think it was in. Oh shoot, which one was it? I think it revolved around the naval. No, it wasn't the naval tree. It was no. What was it? Of course, I don't have my notes in front of me, and I can't think of it anyway, so we'll just leave that alone. Do you remember where in the Baring Gould chronology this fell in?
This
Just
was
out of curiosity.
this was in the memoirs. I think it was published in '97, and I think Baring Gould put it at being in '93 when the story took place. I'm just going by memory what I've read today.
Yeah. It was published in the Strand magazine in January of '93 and in Harper's Weekly in the United
So it's
States.
probably been
in
'87
93.
that they projected this one taking place. So it's fairly early.
Yeah,
It was originally in the memoirs. In America, it was published in the Last Bow.
right.
So one of the things I've always enjoyed the Canon, I can't figure my way out of a cardboard box when it comes to a mystery, but I always like the minutia in the stories.
Right.
So I've always been fascinated by knots and sailor stuff. I did a little research on what possible knot Sherlock Holmes could have decided it was a sailor type of knot around the parcel, the cardboard box, brown paper.
Right.
And well, if there's anybody that's master of knots, it was sailors, especially in this particular time. Ashley's Book of Knots has over 3,000 knots in it, I believe.
How many?
3,000. Now, all of them are practical, some of them are decorative, but if anybody was going to know a knot, it was a sailor. So I did a little bit of research and I came up with, I thought was the knot that wasn't untied on the parcel, that she cut the parcel open with a string. So it's often called a parcel knot, sometimes it's called a harness knot.
Or in this case, the harness bend as it's showing
Not the
there.
granny knot?
Not the granny knot.
No,
Not by a sailor, definitely.
Oh,
and definitely not the bowline knot.
And another thing that's mentioned.
That's the only one I remember.
Another thing that's mentioned near the end of the story is when Lestrade's explaining what the bad guy had in his pocket, it was a sailor's knife. Well, more than likely, what the sailor's knife would have been a marlin spike knife. And the marlin spike is actually the pointy thing at the very end of that knife.
Yes.
And it would have been used, one for loosening knots and two for tightening and loosening shackles. A very handy knife if you're into ropes. And the blade is obviously, anytime you work around ropes, you have to have a sharp blade.
It would help, yes.
So that is a marlin spike, and that would have been probably, it doesn't actually mention marlin spike, but it does say small knife that the sailor was carrying. Another interesting thing that I thought was in there was Holmes mentions what he thinks would be the size of the tip of the nib pen that was used to write the address on the brown package. And he suggested it was probably a J nib. Well, a J nib would have been a part of you dip it in ink type of pen. It wouldn't have been a ballpoint pen or a fountain pen by any means. And a J nib is an uncommon term for a nib nowadays, but I did find some old pictures of what a J nib would have been like. And these nibs would have been interchangeable inside a handle for calligraphy or writing pens. You could have switched them out for whatever broad stroke, thin stroke, wide stroke, whatever you were needing. And the individual picture there was a J nib. And here's another diagram of some of the other choices for
I think
nibs.
she saw one.
So
Yeah, I think
I
my
just-
uncle
I
used to
just,
have some of these.
I just found some of that little minutia in there pretty interesting. Croydon is approximately 9 miles, there's about 9 miles south of London, so it wouldn't have been a very long drive long train ride for Holmes and Watson to get there. Croydon does have their own police station. It's a new building, very ugly compared to what we would imagine a Victorian station would have looked like. So all that stuff is accurate, it's fairly close. And what's kind of amazing to me is that these two sisters hated each other, but they still lived pretty close to each other.
Yeah.
About a mile apart at that point, where the story took place. And another thing we get in here is we get some very good descriptions in this story of what Watson thought of Lestrade, however you want to look at it. The tenacity of a bulldog, that quote comes from this story. So I think there's just tremendous amount of information on Holmes and Watson at the beginning of this story. And that's all I have.
Right.
And the brown study. We didn't know they had that extra room.
What story was that they referred to a Mrs. Turner instead of Mrs. Hudson?
remember that one.
Oh, yeah. I can't remember which one it is. Yeah, it was.
Unfortunately, where I'd be getting most of my information is being used as the camera right now, so I can't look it up. Unless you can find it fairly quickly on the iPad.
I'm gonna try.
Yeah. How are you linking to the internet right now?
I'm just using our data.
Okay. Yeah, because we don't have Wi-Fi down here, unfortunately. I'm going on the LTE network myself somehow.
In 1888, Mrs. Turner was landlady of Sherlock Holmes in Scanlon, Bohemia.
Interesting. She must have been subbing that night.
Yeah, maybe Mrs. Hudson was visiting her dead husband or something.
Visiting her
There's
dead
all
husband?
kinds of speculation.
That's a good point, I didn't know that.
Yeah, with the with the dead husband from what was that area where Trevor was from the Gloria Scott,
Oh, yeah.
where Hudson knows all. Hudson is told all. Fly for your life.
I'm trying to find that quote of when they describe her.
What, Mrs. Turner?
Yeah,
Okay. Let's see.
and you can carry on until I find that.
Well, that brain fever
Mm-hmm.
was a sort of a catch-all term for like depression
Well, there was a textbook to describe a fever that would be associated with hysterical was a hysterical episode. Someone had going through a depression or something, then they might develop a fever along with that.
You give me fever. Okay.
Yeah, probably that kind.
Exactly.
Rob, do you remember where in the scandal she would have been mentioned?
No, I don't. All I remember it was that they mentioned a Mrs. Turner instead of Mrs. Hudson. No, I don't remember exactly where it was.
Probably when they were in the building.
Yeah.
Are you on the Arthur Conan Doyle Encyclopedia?
I'm at Sherlock Holmes ES, a PDF file.
Okay.
If you know a quicker place to find it, you're welcome to it.
If you guys can keep talking, can I get on the?
I can juggle.
Yeah.
Okay.
See if I
Anybody
can-
else have any comments on cardboard?
Anything
the
pop
point
up
about
yet?
half the story just being the confession of the criminal is a good point in the story.
The whole
It's
half
happened
of
a few
it.
places. Yeah, about half of it. I think once again the story also represents how Sherlock Holmes is able to turn on and off his feelings about women. I mean, we believe that he's kind of indifferent to the opposite sex, but once again, in this story, he's able to turn on the charm to deal with Susan Cushing. Was it Susan?
Yeah, Susan.
Susan Cushing. He's able to turn. He obviously knew this woman was upset and tired of the police being there, and tired of these ears being in the outhouse and that kind of stuff. But Sherlock Holmes was able to turn on the charm and smooth things over with her, where she was able to give him all the information he was requiring. Another interesting thing in this story that I thought about when Americans read this story, they're going to read that the ears were in the outhouse. Well, now, if you come from rural America, the outhouse is where you go to read the Sears catalog. No, but we're over here.
And put it to good use.
And put it to good use. We're over here, we would probably use the phrase shed or outbuilding to describe. And it was actually mentioned in the story, once they went out there, they didn't go to the outhouse where the Sears catalog was. They went to a small shed. So over in England, outhouse probably didn't mean what we think of as outhouse. Probably meant what we think of as outbuildings, small
Right.
sheds and other buildings. So
What did they call the outhouse?
probably, my mom always called it the loo.
The loo.
Because
Oh yeah, that city across the river, right?
Yeah, she had an outhouse where she was growing up. It had a flush toilet in it, but it was not inside the main house.
Huh.
So,
Huh.
Whoa.
And Lou's
When-
short for something, isn't it?
probably.
St. Louis, yeah.
Yeah, St. Louis.
Okay, from what I'm reading here, that when Mrs. Turner has brought in the tray, I will make it clear to you. Now, he said. which I'm assuming, let's see, in March 88, Mrs. Turner was the landlady of Sherlock Holmes in a Scandal in Bohemia.
What was the first time Mrs. Hudson appeared in the story?
That's a good question too.
Because then we could kind of put it in there, maybe Mrs. Hudson was just gone for a little while and Mrs. Turner was filling in.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm looking on this, you know, where Mrs. Turner has brought in the tray. I will make it clear to you now. That could be when, let's see if I can find it again. I was doing stuff with this for the Sherlockian cipher that is on the website too, by the way. Still looking for anybody who takes up the challenge on that. Let's see, locations, John Watson, deductions, Baker Street, untold stories, chronology, quotes, plot summary spoiler. My marriage had drifted us away.
Yeah, that was a heartbreaker, that one.
Well, what I was gonna add in that, he was talking about this Navy people knowing the knots. My guess is, since I was in the Army, that Navy people in the modern navies don't know anything about knots because we don't have sails.
No.
Well, it's not just the sails, but I mean, we do have to know some knots because we have to do this thing called secure for sea. You get out there, most of these ships don't have shock absorbers. You're pretty much at the mercy of whatever way the waves are taking you. And if something's on a cabinet that's not secured somehow, it could go rolling off and cause some problems.
So you tie them down?
Some of that we tie down, some of it you can lash in another way, and I didn't learn enough not making myself. I still remember the bowline knot, and that's about it.
The bowling knot?
Bowline.
Bowline.
It's spelled bowline, but we pronounce it bowline.
Bowhead whale is bowhead whale.
Exactly. Exactly.
Even in the biography of Mrs. Hudson on Wikipedia, it mentions the confusion with Mrs. Turner appearing in one of the stories.
Well, I'll leave this on one of your tabs.
Okay.
So you can see it's the Arthur Conan Doyle Encyclopedia. I go to that a lot to get the pictures for these
Yep, that's a great
summaries, as well as some summaries. And the summary for this one was in French. I had to transliterate it and
Can't
shorten
you just
it.
translate it? What does that mean, the difference?
Well, actually, transliterate is the wrong term too. It's kind of like when we think of baptism, we might think it might be one of three things where we're either sprinkling somebody with something on the head, or we're pouring water on their head, or we're dunking them in water. We think it's synonymous, and yet the word baptism, one of the few serious things from my big fat Greek wedding. The dad of the Greek family is actually telling the truth when he talks about the word baptism. It comes from the Greek word baptizo, which means to dunk, to immerse. And that's where it all started from. It just kind of got transliterated by the King James authors to be baptized. How they did it to this day.
So the Baptists are right.
Among a few other groups, yes. So, okay. Well, we got. Is there any comment? No comments coming out. I hope they come out on the ex post facto.
Is this piece of paper the summary you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
If you want to get a look at the summary for everybody, so you can see the pictures.
I don't know if you can see them, they're so dark.
Yeah. Well, we only do so much.
Is
with black
there a
and white.
digital copy on the website?
If you go to Arthur Conan Doyle Encyclopedia, I'm not sure what the site, the URL for that is, but look Google Arthur Conan Doyle Encyclopedia, look for the 62 Sherlock Holmes stories, and look for the cardboard box, and it'll show you a bunch of the Sidney Paget illustrations for that. Some of the last illustrations that we have, in fact the only ones from his last vow, because Paget had not been doing illustrations since the stuff from Return, I do believe. It's usually other guys who have the illustrations for that. Thank you for letting me borrow that back. Let's see. Any other thoughts before I move on to some other things?
That's all I got. Saw
That was
some
good.
on there.
Yeah,
Enjoyed that.
nice bit of homework. One thing I did forget to mention, here are a couple, probably the last hard copies you will ever see of the Camden House Journal, because
Oh,
Bill Cochran is moving over to doing those electronically. I
but he's
emailed
doing
him.
them like in that same format?
I think he's trying to do them in that format or something.
Because
He-
evidently we're not. We're just
We're just printing it across
put
the
stuff on
exactly.
the,
Yeah. So maybe we can start doing something where you can download a PDF version that's more like our old newsletter. That's a lot like work, though. He's been trying to get some help from me on that, and I'm still trying to
Well,
make
I
myself
told him
feel-
you were the only expert I knew.
Yeah, that's scary as it is. So,
You could help me.
yeah, if I had I don't know if he has an address for the Camden House Journal yet or not, but I'll try and pass that on to everybody who's interested. So, that was something else I forgot to bring up when I was bringing up their next meeting on the 7th. So, in fact, if you are listening to this, any of you people who have meetings and hear me giving wrong dates, let me know. Contrary to popular belief, I'm only human. Okay, any other thoughts, any other announcements, anything we forgot?
Did a new Holmes Watson comedy come out yet
That,
with Will Ferrell?
I think that's supposed to be coming out
December.
Christmas.
Christmas?
Actually.
It looks awful in the previews, but we'll see.
It does. But then again, I'm
I hate
sure
Will
that,
Ferrell.
I think,
I hate Will Ferrell.
I think Romeo and Juliet Sherlock Gnomes looked pretty bad too, but Rob Nunn seemed to be having some, Rob Nunn, I'm sorry, I never can get his name right, seemed to have some positive things to say about it, since, hey, it's reminding everybody of Holmes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there is that, and we shall see. Any other parting thoughts?
Well, we haven't had one of them in a while.
Exactly. There we go. Well, if there's nothing else, we may as well take care of the last requirement of reading of 221B,
Oh,
not by Basil Rathbone as we did last month, but by Michael Bragg. So all standing for that.
221B. Here dwell together still two men of note, who never lived and so can never die. How very near they seem, yet how remote that age before the world went all awry. But still the game's afoot for those with ears attuned to catch the distant view. Halloo! England is England yet for all our fears. Only those things the heart believes are true. A yellow fog swirls past the window pane as night descends upon this fabled street. A lonely hansom splashes through the rain. The ghostly gas lamps fail at 20 feet. Here, though the world explode, these two survive, and it is always 1895.
God
Here,
save the
here.
Queen.
Here, here.
Bill Cochran there.
Yeah.
Do any of these are they're all available online?
I think
They're
that's the
available
first
online,
time it's
probably.
ever affected me
Type in
that
borrowed
way.
Spike or not or something.
After all these years, 1975 or 6 when we started. Yeah, and
Well,
so
along the way, we got music for it too.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Next month.
Take out the blooper reel.
Hey, can we have you for Christmas? Oh, they were going to try and make it for
Good try, make it.
Christmas. Alrighty.
They still have a paper for you. but
Yes. All right, and we'll see you then. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you ex post facto. Maybe even see if we can get this on YouTube, perhaps. See you later.
Oh, that